Thank you all for coming and welcome again to the Comic Fest. My name is Rod Underhill. I'll be your moderator for this morning. I'll be introducing the guests in just a moment. By way of introduction of Steve, who's present. In 1998, here in San Diego, I co-founded a local company called MP3.com. MP3.com was in some ways very much like Pacific Comics. It was started by young upstarts. I was the oldest member of the founding team at 40-something years of age. MP3.com, within 18 months, reached a valuation of an amount exceeding $6 billion. Steve Shanes and his brothers, Pablo and Bill, created Pacific Comics a decade or so earlier than my MP3.com. And like MP3.com, they became very valuable very quickly. And within a certain amount of time, we're moving something like $3 to $5 million worth of books a month. Like MP3.com, we greatly, Pacific Comics greatly disturbed the old school comic book publishers like Marvel and DC. With my own MP3.com, I knew that the record labels would attack us, which they did. And I quickly found myself in a firestorm of litigation, and within a matter of months, our $6 million plus valuation diminished to about $370 million, at which point we were smart enough to bail, and I sold my company to Universal Records. Steve, likewise, encountered what I consider to be extremely unfair competition that bordered, if not exceeded, legality on the part of some of the major publishers, which I'll say no more since I don't want to find myself once more in a firestorm of litigation. During the course of the Pacific Comics event, Steve accomplished a couple very extraordinary things. The first idea he had that was truly innovative was to allow the creators to own their works. I was fortunate enough to conduct a very lengthy interview of Steve for Comics Interview magazine, which they're going to be republishing, as they're going to republish the entire run of Comics Interview magazine. In fact, have the first several issues available now for purchase at Lulu.com. Steve gave away 100% of the ownership. Not only that, did everything he could do to facilitate those creators getting movie deals and deals outside of the comic book industry. Famously, Dave Stevens was able to take his Rocketeer to Disney for the Disney movie. The second thing Steve was able to do, by way of offering 100% creator rights to creators, was he was able to bring to his team the greatest comic book people on the planet, including the king of comics, Jack Kirby, who did 2, not just 1, comic books that they'll tell you about today. And of course, Dave Stevens. Mike Grell was a member of the creative team producing a comic book. Many of my heroes were there at the time doing the most beautiful comics I'd ever seen. They not only were written and drawn and colored and lettered by the best people in the business, but they had the highest production values that I had seen at the time. These things were beautiful. So we're very pleased to have Steve himself here. He has not spoken publicly about Pacific Comics, as far as I know, since I did the interview of him 20 years ago. Joining the team, next to Steve, on his left, we have James Van Hise, a man I've admired for over 20 years, a prolific author of books, including unauthorized. And see, he's a rebel like the rest of us. Star Trek books. He's a noted comic book historian, gifted author. On Steve's right, we have Paul Tallarday. Paul Tallarday has been a close personal friend of mine for over 2 decades. Paul was a production genius at Pacific. He often fixed problems on the fly in very unusual ways, very successful ways. Also a colorist. Barbara Marker. Barbara Marker is a colorist. You will probably know her from her fantasy art. She's a fantastic fantasy illustrator. Tom Luth. Tom Luth is a colorist, is also an illustrator. Tom has worked for pretty much every major comic book company that has ever existed, from DC to Disney, and he is a member of the famed Groo Crew, one of the four gentlemen that produced The Wanderer under the guidance of the primary creator Sergio Aragones. And I, as I said, did have the luck to interview and get to know Steve a couple decades ago for a massive two-part interview of Steve where we went through the entire history of Pacific Comics.